Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Anderson, Associate Executive Director of SMI. We're so glad that you're all joining us today for the very first class of our new SMI University. We're very excited to be launching this new program for SMI members and their emerging leaders. We're going to be hosting monthly webinars through at least the spring of 2021, and then we're going to continue based on the feedback from our members and the participants. So we really look forward to your feedback and your input after today's program and as we go along to make sure that these programs are relevant and useful to all of you. And for our very first class of SMI University today, I'm very excited to welcome as our official faculty, Curtis Lancaster, who's the Vice President of Supply Chain for Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health in Lebanon, New Hampshire. As many of you know, Dartmouth-Hitchcock's Supply Chain Department was named Department of the Year by Healthcare Purchasing News just recently. It's a wonderful honor and recognition of the great work they're doing together. Today, Curtis is going to share some insights with us about his leadership approach, about the experience that brought him to where he is today, and also walk us through the department's journey to being nationally recognized, what the key success factors were to make that happen. From a housekeeping perspective, all of you are on mute for this presentation. If you do have a question, feel free to ask it at any point during the program by typing it into the questions feature of the webinar. And Christine, I think you have a slide to show everyone what that looks like. There's a questions feature in your webinar control panel. So just click on the questions feature, type your question in, and Christine or I will share those questions with Curtis as we go along during the program. We're really glad all of you are with us today. And Curtis, it looks like we're turning the slide deck and the control of the screen over to you, and I'll turn the presentation over to you. We're just delighted to have you, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Nancy. Let's make sure you can see my presentation. Does it show?
Yeah, it's looking great.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the SMI members and to the emerging leaders. As Nancy said, my name is Curtis Lancaster. I'm the Vice President of Supply Chain at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health. Here's a picture of our campus here in Lebanon, New Hampshire. There we go. So just real quick, a little bit about my experience and my leadership journey. So this is my 5th health system. You can see on the left-hand side the different health systems that I've worked at. Providence, Phoenix Children's, Banner University in Tucson, Arizona, Multicare, and now Dartmouth-Hitchcock. I also have out-of-industry experience with United Parcel Service, the United States Naval Reserve, and I've taught supply chain for 2 programs, one at Pima Community College in Tucson and one at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington. It's given me a real good broad-based understanding of for-profit, which was UPS, and then switching over into healthcare, which was a totally different world. One example is at UPS, obviously you had to get all of your initiatives completed day by day. And when I came over to healthcare, we had a training that all of our staff had to get done by October 1, and it was mandatory. October 1 rolled around and only 40% of the staff across the organization had completed the training, so they just moved the deadline up a month. Something that would never have happened at UPS is sort of what I was experienced when I first started in healthcare. My healthcare experience is experienced across academic medical centers, which I'm at now, faith-based, secular, children's hospitals. So again, just a lot of experience across a lot of different areas and the opportunity to see what outside healthcare looked like prior to coming into healthcare. A few thoughts on leadership, things that I try to manifest in myself and look for on a team that comes with me. Optimistic, positive attitudes. We all know there's plenty of negative that happens to us in supply chain. Whether it's a package that's missing, whether it's a back order we're chasing down, we hear very quickly about all the negatives that are out there. And having that ability to look on the bright side, look at the optimistic point of view is a critical success factor for supply chain professionals. I think another one is awareness. We need to be aware both to read the room when we're presenting to people, to be able to read how people are interacting with us and receiving us when we're interacting with them, whether it's on a nursing floor or in a meeting. And I think that's a key point for everybody, is that awareness. Obviously, you need to do what you say you will. Nothing will derail a supply chain or a supply chain leader quicker than committing to something and then not getting it done, because you lose the credibility that you started to build. Building relationships, part of that is doing what you say you will, but spending time to get out of your office when we were able to get out of our offices and we're on site, and try to meet with people in their location and understand what it is they do and the challenges they're facing. Lean in. That just simply means when an opportunity is there, don't be the group that doesn't raise their hand to get involved. Whether it's something that might not even seem like it's supply chain related, like a throughput initiative, jump in and help where you can. And then I think the things that I'll focus on most today that have helped us at Dartmouth is you need to market your accomplishments. Nobody's going to sit back and just all of a sudden pluck you out of a crowd and say, this is a person we need to advance in our organization. You need to be able to market what it is your supply chain or yourself has done. Just a quick example, a couple of years ago, our supply chain got the moniker the Storm Watchers. When the hurricane was going to hit Puerto Rico, we had somebody who was watching the news, knew that manufacturing happened there, and started spreading the news a couple of days before the actual impact hit. And that helped us at least prepare on what we would do in a sort of a plan B type scenario. And so we internally started calling that person the Storm Watcher, and it took through the organization where we became the Storm Watchers. And so take those small instances of success, create a story around it, and then tell that story. And then finally, make a strategy, actually write that strategy down and execute against it. All of us make goals year over year, and I'll speak for me, and maybe I'm the only one out there, but I did not have a strategy that was written down. I had notes, I had an area in my head, I know where I was going, but it wasn't until I came here to Dartmouth-Hitchcock that I actually put it to pen and paper. And this is what it looks like. Our print shop printed it out. It's a nice document that we're able to share with our staff. We'll go over this just a little bit today, but you get an idea. It's something that we just said, we're going to put a line in the sand, we're going to create a document, and that's what we're going to execute on. Real briefly about Dartmouth-Hitchcock. We're currently a 5-hospital system. We're in the process of combining with another 3-hospital system, which will take us to 8 hospitals. We are predominantly in New Hampshire and Vermont. Very high acuity patients come here, top 5% in the country. In addition to the 5 hospitals, there's also, as you can see on the map, a number of other hospitals in the New Hampshire and Vermont region, New Hampshire's on the right, that we contract with. So it's called the New England Alliance for Health, and we take these smaller hospitals and aggregate the volume, and then we go to market on their behalf. We meet monthly. They're part of the same GPO we are, and we help them to drive price down and give them some access to maybe some services that they couldn't get on their own. Couple of numbers: outpatient visits, patients discharged. We're about a $2.3 billion organization in net patient revenue, 13,000 employees. I think if I haven't mentioned it, we're in a remote location of New Hampshire. This picture shows us kind of in the middle of the wilderness. Not a large population. We have a declining population actually right in the 30-mile radius around our hospital. And so it's a challenge as an academic medical center, but that's the physical of what we are. When I arrived at Dartmouth, of the 5 hospitals, there were a minimum of 5 different supply chains. So each hospital had their own. And even within the academic medical center, which is the one that you see in the picture, there were multiple supply chains within it. There hadn't been any strong leadership in the supply chain prior. It was overseen by facilities management. So I became the first vice president at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health for supply chain. So it was a complete rebuild to be able to pull together all of these different supply chains into one unified supply chain, and then to be able to influence the organization that it was a professional organization or a professional department, able to help them in ways that maybe they didn't think that they could be helped before by a supply chain. So that is the journey that we have been on here at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, was pull the supply chains together and then execute on our strategic plan to the benefit of our organization. About my department, you can see on the left-hand side some of the departments we oversee. Patient transport is probably the one that's a little outside the norm for supply chains. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the partners that we are, our GPO, as I mentioned, under the aggregation group, NEA, or the New England Alliance for Health, and the NPC is the Northeast Purchasing Coalition. In the middle, that's our tagline: we support the hands that heal, and I'll get into that in just a little bit later. So what's a strategy? Why is it important? You have to know where you're going. It's a multi-year plan, and one of the things that it does for us is it helps us to be non-reactionary. Many supply chains fall into the reactionary mode because they're just, whether it's a pandemic, of course, that hit all of us, but it's reacting to the next emergency that comes to them. And having a plan, having it written down, having it communicated throughout your supply chain helps everybody to get a little more strategic and not have that reactionary piece. It helps you enable what you're doing now and then build those capabilities that you're going to need in the future, because you know what you're going to need because you have a roadmap to get there. A lot of words here, but basically our supply chain, our mission is to bring value to our current customers. And then we intend to extend the value of our supply chain into the communities we serve. And this became very useful during the pandemic when people were locked down and not able to come to the hospital, because it fell right in line with what the mission of our supply chain was. It's to deliver excellence where we are within four walls, but also be enabled to go outside the four walls and deliver that same excellence in other locations. Our vision is to adapt. I think all of us have had to do that during the pandemic, and it's adapting to the evolving realities of healthcare. And I think all of us experience that. So we were able to put our mission and our vision into play because exactly what we had put down is is exactly what we encountered during the pandemic. Our strategic plan has four major pillars. It's not complex. People is the number one. We'll focus on that a lot. Technology and analytics. Trade for us is both internal trade customers, so our internal customers, as well as the vendors and manufacturers we deal with external. We lump that into trade. And then innovation. And I'll spend most time talking about people and innovation. And so the first thing that we did, started having supply chain retreats with our leadership, pull everyone together to develop the strategy document. That was one of the first things we did, I think within the first year, to be able to say, okay, this is where we collectively want to go, get everybody on the same page. We created the rallying cry of we support the hands that heal. It was our connection to the clinical enterprise and got everybody on the same page. Another key point was we had to make sure that our strategy aligned with the organization's strategy. And so that when we're successful, we're helping the success of the organization. This was a pretty broad-based team. We had our management team come up with the broad pillars and some of the action items that you'll see in a minute. And then we broke it down, individuals working on the four different strategies on what we felt was important over the next few years for our supply chain to work on. So under people, we want to attract the best possible people we can. We want to develop those people. And then, of course, we want to retain them. What happens at Dartmouth-Hitchcock in the nursing enterprise is people come here, they're attracted by the name Dartmouth. They'll stay for a year or two, and then they leave. And so the clinical group is in a constant training mode, and we want to make sure that we avoid that in the supply chain world. some of the pathways to success and some of the things that we did, and I challenge all of you to, if you haven't done this, it's absolutely critical, is to make sure you have a contemporary org chart. So many of us have the same job descriptions that we've always had, a contract specialist or a buyer or a strategic sourcing specialist. Well, we found that we needed to add a couple different job descriptions out there. And we're not an organization that has a big budget, so we weren't able to add. We had to get creative. So as there was turnover, we'd combine two positions together and create something new. So we were either FTE neutral or even FTE positive, but we were able to bring in the more strategic positions. Just a couple real quick I'll highlight. A program manager, and many of you might have them, but basically we hired a program manager. We have 3 of them, and their focus, they don't have people reporting to them, but they're a high level within our supply chain. And the focus there is to be able to let them do things that are critical for us, but pull people who manage people away from their responsibilities. For example, Joint Commission walks in. The minute Joint Commission walks in, you have to have somebody with Joint Commission for quite a while, and then you do the follow-up to the Joint Commission to make sure things happen. If you pull one of your management out to do that, they get behind in their regular work. So we felt that it was important to have a program manager for regulatory, one for a pandemic type situation, which of course came in quite useful during the recent global pandemic. Demand planner. So we're looking at inventory management a different way. Instead of planning after the fact, looking at historical usage and then bringing in product like flu season right now, how much you're going to have. We base it off last year and maybe put a growth factor, trying to get ahead of that and looking at it in a way that other industries do and bring in true demand planning. And we've been working on that for about a year and have a dedicated person. And then finally, resiliency. And that's focused on, mapping out where our manufacturers do business. Our resiliency partner is a firm called Resilink. There's other ones out there. It doesn't matter who it is, but I think it's important we're all focused on it. They gave us early alerts. We get events all the time. There's a volcano erupting in this location. There's political unrest over here. There's an earthquake over here. And it helps us to identify if there's going to be a disruption to any of what's happening in our supply chain. And so making sure that that we have people focused in these areas we felt would be very important. So the org chart. We also wanted to know what our employees thought. Like you, we have an annual employee engagement survey, and they're okay, and we use those. But we also developed the y'all. You asked, we listened. And I have an example of it a little bit later, but essentially we asked the employees to write down their concerns, and then we respond to them and we publish them and we put it on the wall behind us when we meet with the employees, so that when it is time to take the employee opinion survey, engagement survey, or whatever it is they're doing, they can visually see all the things they asked and all the things we're able to accomplish for them. And that's just another way to pull people together on the same team to be able to advance your mission and your strategy. We also need to make sure, and what we did here at Dartmouth was a cultural fit. Obviously, when I came in, I brought in a specific type of person that I was looking for, a specific way of doing business, and we had to make sure that we had the right people. The voice of the employee was critical, but we also wanted to make sure that the culture that we were trying to change, one more of execution, one more of listening to our customers, stuck. So we created a culture committee. So we have people from all of our hospitals and some of our professional people, and they lead culture activities, whether it's supply chain week and some of the different things we do, socials, putting out the newsletters. They lead that for us, help us to communicate better as leaders so that we're able to connect on a deeper level. And then, of course, diversity and inclusion will always help in your workplace, and we focus on value-based behaviors. As I mentioned, our division, we brand ourselves the team that supports the hands that heal. And we're always, as we're looking in the new org chart, as we're looking at these new positions, we're looking for skills, of course, that can do what we need to do now, but we're looking to the future. We know that whether it's advanced robotics, whether it's drone technology, synthetic biology, deep machine learning, some of these things sound so futuristic, but they're here, and they're going to disrupt our supply chains at some point. So we all need to be developing our own skill sets, but also looking to bring in these types of skill sets into our supply chains, because we don't want our organizations looking to somebody outside of us to be able to be successful in our supply chains. And then last, you have to make sure you move quickly to get the right people in the right seats. I personally have a bias to develop people to get them to be the right people. Sometimes, most of the time that's successful, sometimes it's not. The critical piece is making sure you have the right ones. Won't spend a lot of time here on the strategic pillar of technology and analytics, other than once you have a plan and you know where you're going, you can then assess your technology and say, do I have the technology I need to be able to go where I need to go? And in many cases, we have technologies that we haven't fully maximized. That was our case. We're technology rich, but data poor. And so making sure that we cataloged what we had, enhanced and maximized it so that we minimize our spend and be able to execute on what we were trying to do with bringing in minimal extra technology. Again, trade, that's interacting with your external partners and your internal customers. And I'll go into a little bit about this a little bit later, but the point is mutually beneficial is what's key. I think this has been probably the biggest differentiator for us. Number one, our people, and number two, innovation. And we could not have innovated if we did not have some of the blocking and tackling baseline from excellent people. So for us, we want to think different, we want to plan different, and we want to do different. And I challenge all of you, if you're not doing that, please do so. We ask our people to challenge existing processes, adapt other industries' best practices, similar to what we did with demand planning and what we're doing with resiliency. We wanted to make sure we were flexible and nimble and had a patient-centered supply chain. Came in very handy during the pandemic. And then we tell our people, embrace the improbable. Of course, the improbable in this case was the global pandemic, but some of those other things I mentioned, they're coming. They may seem improbable, but we have to be prepared for it. So to do that, you need to plan different. Leverage who you are. Our name, Dartmouth-Hitchcock, we leveraged as best we could to be able to attract disruptors and innovators, both on an employee basis and the people that we do business with. And then, of course, we develop our staff who embrace that change. Make sure you're clinically integrated, technology enabled. And then, as I mentioned before, and you'll probably hear me say again, we all need to upgrade and expand our skill set to be able to be prepared for the future. What we're doing today is great, but all of us had the same challenge during the pandemic. A broker wants to sell us stuff and wire money. And that's something that was a little bit new for many of us, that we had to then exercise some different muscles that either we hadn't used for a long time, or we had to bring other people into the supply chain to help us to be able to do that. So today, many of us are changing our supply chain. We're going to source directly from global manufacturers or reshore or onshore product. Honing our analytical capabilities. All of us are in a margin fight right now. We all lost a lot of money, and we're needing to help the organization to trim some expense or to improve margin. I challenge all of us to develop a people strategy and use it. Everything that you do and successful, whether it's for yourself personally and you have your own personal people strategy, which I encourage you to do, or whether it's for your department or your supply chain, develop one, communicate it so people know what that strategy is, and then use it. Tomorrow, although tomorrow's kind of here today, figure out last mile deliveries direct to the home. We are looking at a drone delivery company to possibly be able to do that. There's another healthcare organization, Novant, who had started doing that. We're looking at that as well, to be able to provide one additional piece of service, especially considering the stay at home and the reluctance of some people to leave their home right now during the pandemic. Leverage robotics and automation. Explore all of these different ways of of doing business, because they're going to be here whether we want them to or not. So I want to share just a couple additional stories about my supply chain and some of the things we did. I talked briefly about the y'all, and I'm going to show you that here in a moment. Another thing that we did is to hear the voice of the customer. We'd do surveys, SurveyMonkey, or we would talk to people during rounding, and all of those are great ways to get feedback. But what we did is, because our team is looking to adapt other industry practices, our team is always looking to challenge the status quo. One of our team members was traveling, and like many of you, they were at an airport, back when we were able to go to airports, and they were able to, as they exited the restroom, there was a little kiosk, and it had 4 buttons: a smiley face, a kind of smiley face, a kind of sad face, and then just an angry, frowny face. And it was a happy or not kiosk. And so they thought, how great would it be to be able to get instant feedback from our customers on whether the service that we're delivering as a supply chain is truly meeting their needs. I'm going to go into that in a slide or two, so you can see what that looks like. But that was critical for us to be able to connect to our customers and not just say we're going to do something, but show them that we took it serious. And then other industry best practices, as I had mentioned, the resiliency planning, so that we know what's coming. In the case of the pandemic, and with Resolink, who we partnered with, it was early January. We started getting alerts that there was a infectious outbreak in China, and then it migrated to something a little more serious in Wuhan, China, and that got my attention because when I worked at Multicare on the West Coast, we'd actually traveled to Wuhan with the idea that we'd manufacture our own product. So I'd actually been in some of these factories where this product is manufactured. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, Charlie Michelli at the University of Vermont. We do a lot together. And Charlie said, Cardinal just had the back order or the recall on their gowns, and it's right before the Chinese New Year. And if people are going to travel to China, even with this sort of the beginning rumblings of a possible outbreak, and then travel back, this could get bad. And we made a decision right then to start doing some contracting, ordering things, PPE type products. In this case, it was 2 containers of surgical gowns, and we did it way back in January because we saw that there could be a potential problem. We would have never been able to put those dots together had we not had a resiliency partner. And this has now shifted our thinking. So many of us, if not all of us, have heard SMS, spun bond, melt blown, spun bond. It's the raw material that goes and makes the masks, the gowns, and everything that we use. And yet, that's not the raw material. When I was in Wuhan, I saw this large machine, and they took these large bags, like it looked like a fertilizer bag. They tore it open and they dumped it in a hopper, and something happened, and out came the cloth that gets turned into isolation gowns and everything. So there's a raw material before the SMS. I don't know what it is, but I want to know what it is. And so our supply chain is pivoting how we do strategic sourcing to zero in on raw materials and take a look at sort of like a commodities broker on the stock exchange or in futures. There's going to be a shortage of isopropyl alcohol or quaternary ammonia, or the product that goes into SMS. And in SMS, it goes into 43,000 SKUs. So how many of those other SKUs do we use in our supply chain? We know about the masks, we know about the gowns, we know about the drapes, but they're also used in diapers. It's also used in hot and cold packs. Are we going to run into a shortage there because there's a raw material that's running in short supply? And so we'll call individual manufacturers, and they are experts on the raw material for their product. But we are working with our resiliency partner and internally to build the capability to keep our eyes on the raw materials, so that just like when an event pops up, there was an earthquake and or a hurricane and all the capability in Puerto Rico is gone. Okay, we know about that. But what about also, if we added on to that, tracking the raw material, so that when there's a disruption somewhere, we have a chance to react and pivot and do something different. And then finally, with demand planning, trying to do a different industry concept and bring it in. And it was those two areas, the resiliency planning, because we were doing this prior to the pandemic, and the demand planning that resonated with the healthcare purchasing news team. They saw the focus on the people, which came from our people strategy, and they saw the focus on the innovation that actually paid dividends that really differentiated us. Now, of course, it was also pulling the disparate supply chains together into one. It was, doing all that, the basic stuff that we needed to do. We did it in a very accelerated period of time. But those are the types of things that got the attention when we put in our application. So this, I know it's very complex, is the y'all, the US, we listen. So the yellow one on the right-hand side is the suggestion. So we encourage people, our staff primarily, but we've also had internal customers, write down things that they would like to see us do. So you can see on the left-hand side, our fiscal year 19, you asked for communication. We listened. These are the 4 things we did based on your suggestions. More employee engagement and recognition. These are the specific things that we did in response to your specific concern. We're listening to you as an employee, all the way down the line. And we have this for all of our departments, and we have it posted in a prominent location so that all have an opportunity to put an anonymous suggestion. Most of them were able to do. Building a parking garage so I have parking was one we could not do. But, the ones that we were able to do, we put on there, and we just let the folks know we are listening to you. This is Happy or Not. It helped us dramatically start shifting the culture with our stakeholders. It's a busy slide, but you can see the 4 colors, the dark green, the lighter green, the kind of the pink, and then the red. And you can't really see it, but over here, and I don't know if you can see my pointer, but my bottom experience point, now understand we're usually not this much red, but it's during a pandemic. So we knew that it was Unit 2 East. That's where the biggest issues were, 5 a.m. and Mondays. So Monday at 5 a.m. on 2 East was the biggest dissatisfier of our customers. And so we were able to quickly diagnose what the problem was. The user could just hit a button, and it maps it by hour, so you know when people are happy, when they're sad. You can kind of see it in these slides, at what time of day. It's usually early morning or late night. And then we give them the option to say, what is it that you're either really thrilled about or not thrilled about? Is it product availability? Is it the customer service of the staff? Is some piece of equipment missing? And so they're able to take an extra step and let us know what it is. And we get alerted. If there's 2 or 3 negatives in a row, we get an alert right to our phone, and our manager in the distribution area pays a visit to the unit. So it's almost instantaneous. It seemed, when we first thought of Happy or Not, that sounds so simple, but it has been a real big differentiator for us to solidify the promises that we made. When I mentioned make sure you do what you say you're going to do, this goes a long way in building that credibility with our customers. This, many of you have probably seen something very similar. It's a heat map of where manufacturers are throughout the country. This is just a screenshot. This is not anything live or mine, but it's mapping all the time for vulnerability. Where are we as a supply chain vulnerable? Is it a geopolitical problem? Is it a weather problem? What is it that's causing a potential disruption? And we're in the process, and I think every supply chain needs to get behind this so that we know who we're doing business with. I know the manufacturers now who make my masks, but who's supplying them the pellets that go into the stuff that make masks? So I don't know end to end my supply chain. I strive for an ethical supply chain. I strive for visibility. I want to make sure that I know who I'm doing business with. This is something we had presented about a year and a half ago to our clinicians. For supply chains, change will be constant. There's vulnerability. There's problems everywhere. You can see in here recalls, H1N1, politics. There's pandemic in there. So it's not going to stop. It's going to continue, and we have to be prepared for that. So just a couple real quick things about our supply chain. We were lucky. We did not have the experience of some places like California, New York, Florida, and others. We've had a trickle. It's been a steady trickle, but we didn't have that massive spike, and that gave us a chance to build up our stockpile of product. But we're also able to divide and conquer. So we split up our supply chain leadership, one into searching local manufacturers for hand sanitizer, face shields, etc. And we also divided with the University of Vermont Health Network. And what allowed us to do that, both with UVM and with our own team, was the capabilities that we were building and the trust. We'd worked together to elevate everything that we were doing internally within our group and learn to trust each other implicitly. And that paid massive dividends during the pandemic. We had logistics flexibility. We threw things over the water and not just through the air. As we saw that JFK and Chicago and other airports were backed up, we flew things into Canada and brought it down over the border and partnered with our government affairs to make sure that border stayed open. And many of the senators, every senator of northern states that border Canada signed a document making sure and requesting that border stay open. It was incredibly critical to us because that's where our products were flowing from. We have a roadmap. It's changing all the time. This is the one we had before. So it's not just a 1 year or 2 year plan, but we'll be looking at this towards the end of this calendar year and revamping it. But again, the point is get something down on paper. It's going to change. Something's going to happen, whether it's a pandemic, but make sure your plan. And I encourage you each individually to have your own plan. Believe it or not, winning HPN Supply Chain Department of the Year was one of the things that we wanted to accomplish, and we did it. We did it through teamwork, having a strategy, pulling all of us together, executing on a plan, and then telling that story. And as I probably tell my supply chain way too often about the improbable that's coming and what might happen. All of these things that you see up there, trends, hotspots. I see a commercial on TV where Domino's was going to meet somebody at a hotspot and give them their pizza. Then we started thinking, are we going to be able to meet customers, patients, for maybe a pre-surgical kit at a specific hotspot and deliver their product to them? So we started thinking of things a little bit different on how we could provide service in a slightly different way. And I think with that, we'll open it up to questions.
I'm trying, there we go. I'm trying to get back on video so I can throw you some questions, Curtis. Thank you so much. That was a great program, and we've got a lot of great comments. The first question is very logistical, and that is someone wanted to know, how can they access that heat map that you shared? Is that through a tool that you have, or how can they access the heat map tool itself?
Yeah, so my guess is there's other companies that are doing this. The partner that we had is Resilink, RESILINC, and they are a really good partner, and they have a group, a subset called Healthcare Transparency Initiative. And the goal is transparency in healthcare and trying to help us all get a map like that. So one thing that's important, number one, is to know who we're doing business with and where those disruptions might come. Critically important. Second part, it looks good. And all of us want to be able to have a professional look so that we are a strategic voice that our organization turns to. And showing that heat map or one similar to it that's actually ours is important. We actually have 2 large screen displays at our supply chain office that have our heat map up all the time. So our staff, when they were able to come in the office, were able to see it and be able to start making proactive requests of manufacturers because they would see a disruption coming.
Excellent.
But I'm sure there are companies that have the same thing. I believe Vizient is building a tool, has something similar. I'm sure there's other ones out there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I got a nice comment and a question from Chuck Jensen. He said, first of all, congratulations to you and your team for the amazing recognition. The materials you've presented are very helpful, so thanks. He wants to know how long the journey took your team and what single thing you would suggest someone start with for others to start seeking Supply Chain of the Year recognition.
So I've been at Dartmouth-Hitchcock for 4.5 years. And so when I walked in the door, we immediately, and it wasn't because of me, lost $20 million that year. And there was no ability to add things to a supply chain. We actually lost a few staff in that particular time frame. And so it was a very accelerated, I'd worked at, as you saw at the beginning, different health systems across the country. And so I've had a chance to stub my toe and make quite a few mistakes. And so we were very accelerated in what we did, pulling all those supply chains into one, getting out and working with our end users. I would say a good year is what got us to really start moving well as a team. The critical factor for us was this document. We created that rallying cry of we support the hands that heal. We created a document. I happened to have the print shop report to me. So we created a very nice document. And then we had supply chain retreats. And we brought all of our professional and emerging leaders in supply chain, but then we also brought in leaders from other departments. We brought in Periop. We brought in IT, the lab, HR, and they participated in our retreat. All of them got a copy of our document, and they were able to start seeing us in a different light. So that's the first part. Then the second part is you have to fill out the application. So there's an actual application process. It's a lot of writing, and it's very difficult to take all of the great accomplishments that all of you have done. I know all supply chains are highly successful and are all probably candidates to win the Department of the Year, but it's being thoughtful how you type it out. Give yourself plenty of time and make sure that you so what we did is we split it up into different pieces, and then we brought it all together so it was all in one voice. And I would say it took us maybe 3 weeks to a month to make sure that that document was locked down, solidified how we wanted it to be.
Excellent. A lot of focus for sure.
Yeah, and you have to tell your story. I mean, we've been telling our story internally, like I had mentioned, the storm watchers and whatnot. We've been practicing telling our story internally, and it wasn't for any recognition or anything. It was just to let people know what we're able to do to help them, so that they don't need to do some of the things they were doing, whether it's contacting a vendor. We do that for them, so they have more time to spend at their job. And then the idea, oh, why don't we collate all these ideas, all the things we're doing together into an application and then present it? And then, we were lucky enough to be awarded.
Wonderful. Lucky and hardworking.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah, there was that part. Here's a question from Doug Prangley. He's asking, what are the key attributes that you look for in a partner? And I'm assuming he means like a vendor supplier partner.
Transparency. So I'll give you a perfect example. So we're going out to vendors right now and we're saying, we're doing this resiliency mapping, and we would like you to share with us all of your manufacturing sites so that we know where they are. So if there's a disruption, we know how it's going to impact us down to the item. And if you do sub components where you take it from one site to another, map that all out, and then give us a plan for if there's a disruption on when you're going to alert us and what you're going to do and when you're going to be back at full strength. And there are vendors and manufacturers that we interact with that say, no, we're not going to give you that. That is a strategic advantage for us. And we're scratching our head. We know you're all in Wuhan or we're in Wuhan, so I don't know what's strategic about that. So I would say build trust with us. there's a book called The Speed of Trust, and it's very valuable, and it's transparency. Don't pretend to be something you're not. And just like I said, if you say you're going to do something, do it. I encourage you to do the same.
It sounds so simple, but I think for some it's not as simple as it sounds.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Another question is on value analysis. We have a question about whether Dartmouth has a value analysis program and how it's constructed.
We do. So we're right now we had just a little bit of staff turnover in that area, but we have 3 nurses that are led by a director. Like I said, we have some openings. So if any of you want to come and work at a great place here in New Hampshire, there's some postings on our website. And then at each of the different hospitals, a representative that we're asking, or we've asked for them to participate for a year in our value analysis program. And what they don't report to us. They're just a partner because, again, we're not a big supply chain that has unlimited resources to hire a bunch of people. But their role is working with our on-site manager that we have to make sure that things are communicated, that we get the voice of that organization, and it comes back to the table so that we can make decisions. Now, right now, we're on a pause on conversions just because of the pandemic and a lot of the focus not being on bringing in new products. But when we take when we turn that valve back on, that's what we'll be doing again.
Sorry, Curtis, can you hear me?
I can now. Yeah. Were you
my
talking
my
there?
internet went out. This is one of the realities of virtual working, right? My internet froze, and I could see you, but you were frozen. So
I didn't know if you wanted me to tell what was happening. So
sorry about that. So you answered the question on value analysis, and the next question relates to the Happy Not Happy program, and you showed us some great screenshots of the output from that program. Part of the question is, do you use any kind of bots or AI, or what kind of technology do you use to support the Happy Not Happy program?
We use their program. So Happy or Not it's web-based, and so there is no IT component to it. They have their machine learning built in, but right now what we've done is we place it in clean supply rooms. So when a nurse goes in to her supplies or his supplies and leaves, they can immediately hit a button and let us know how they feel. We're starting to expand it out to areas as well. And then behind the scenes, it just press, and then they can do a secondary selection. And then there's this rich analytics behind it that maps it, like I said, by hour, by day, and zeroes in exactly where you have high success so that you can go in and talk to departments, how well things are going and reinforce that. But then the areas where they struggle so that you can shore it up quickly.
Excellent. And same thing on the Happy Not Happy report. Do you provide the opportunity for feedback at every hospital? And I think you said you're sort of limiting it right now, but then how do you share the feedback back with your users?
We sit down with the nursing leadership. And so sitting down with the nursing leadership and going over it. And, it's eye-opening to them too. In many cases, the nurse manager's like, we didn't know that this was happening at 3 a.m. Nobody told us either, and so it's been a learning both ways. And the key for us when we sit down with them, because we sat down with the group first to say, this is what we're doing and this is the purpose. And it just builds that relationship even deeper because they know we care, they know we're listening, and they know that we're responding and doing what we say we're going to do.
Excellent. Excellent. A question also for you, Curtis, in terms of your sort of decision-making process, what is the most difficult decision that you've had to make through this COVID crisis, or if there's a more difficult decision you've had to make in your career beyond COVID, what are kind of the difficult decisions you've had to make, and how have you worked through those?
Well, most of the difficult decisions, people, whether it's staff, whether it's even vendors that we interact with. We have many vendor partners who come to us with absolutely perfect or fantastic partners with and invest in. We're just limited in what we can and can't do. Pandemic, I think the most difficult thing was early on, organization made the decision to halt elective surgeries with the idea that there wasn't enough PPE. Turns out we were able to very quickly have enough PPE for that. But, making the decisions on what we're going to do going forward, I think, are the more difficult ones. With me, I try to get the opinion of my directors. I highly regard their opinion. And so, asking them sort of a consensus on where we go. I don't always follow, what they say, but I want to get that input so that I make the best possible decision I can. But it's usually around people is the most difficult.
Yeah. I would concur with that. Those are the hardest decisions to make for sure. The other question is about your top leadership lessons learned during the pandemic. What kind of did you learn that you hadn't known before, or did you reinforce about your leadership style that the pandemic really brought to the front?
Well, that's a really great question because, as I'd mentioned, we'd spent a lot of time on a people strategy. We'd put a lot of time trying to build the skills and trusting our people. And during the pandemic, it was one of my team that sat in incident command. And so that person became sort of the leader of our response for the supply chain. And so I took a side seat. I was not leading all of the effort. That person was leading the effort and saying, okay, this person's doing this person's doing this. So it was gratifying to be able to see the expertise in action. It was great to see that, as we strove to hire for flexibility, as we strove to hire gritty people who aren't going to, get, they're going to roll up their sleeves and they're going to get it done one way or another. And to actually see that happen was gratifying and let me know that what we were doing is the right path.
That's excellent. What a great thing for you to watch and see happen for your team, and a great reflection on your leadership too, Curtis.
Thank you.
I think I've got time for one more question. We've got a little more time, but I have one more question that I'm noticing. How did you overcome the internal political and cultural barriers that you no doubt ran into as you drove the cultural change in your department?
Well, when I first came in, I come from the West Coast, and I moved all the way over to the Northeast, and very, very nice people over here, just like I'm sure there are everywhere else, and maybe weren't quite as ready to make some dramatic changes as I wanted them to. And, and I think it's storytelling a little bit. It's doing what you say you're going to do and holding people accountable. I think the biggest trap that people fall into in trying to shift the culture is not demonstrating it themselves. And then when somebody doesn't actually follow what you need them to do culturally, not doing anything about it. And so you have to say what you're going to do. And so if it's not okay to do X and somebody does X, there has to be some sort of repercussion for that. And it doesn't take long, to be honest with you. If people can see that you have a strategy, and that strategy actually makes sense, and that you're going to give people latitude to do the right thing, but when they're totally out of line, that you're going to step in and address it, the culture changes pretty quickly. Either people self decide to leave because it's not for them, or they're like, this is different, but I'm willing to give it a try.
And hey, he really meant it.
Yeah, he meant
He
it.
really meant what he said. That's pretty cool. Well, that's excellent. I think that's it for our questions today, and I just want to thank you for being with us. We've gotten, in addition to the comments, we've gotten a lot of great questions. In addition to the questions, we've gotten a lot of great comments from the audience, thanking you and congratulating you on your honor and being so appreciative of what you've shared with us today. So we really appreciate your being here with us and sharing your story. It's always great to hear from the people who actually achieved the goals and how they did it. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Going forward, we do have 2 additional SMI University webinars coming up this fall that you'll be hearing about soon. We have a program on building career success with Jim Francis from Mayo and Susan Lewis from Staples. That will be on October 21st. And then the advisory board is going to be sharing with us responses on their annual supply chain survey. We shared that survey with all of the SMI members, and I know a number of them responded, in addition to responses from across the industry. So that's actually going to be a combined leadership and SMI University program on November 3rd. So we'll be extending invitations not only to our emerging leaders for that program, but also to the C-suite leaders within our member organizations in addition to our members. So we're looking forward to having all of you join us for those 2 programs. And we, again, really thank you, Curtis, for a great program today. There will be an evaluation that I will send out after today's program via email that will be an evaluation of today's program and also looking for input on future SMI University programming. So we appreciate your taking a few minutes to share your thoughts on this SMI University program, today's program, as well as our future programming coming up. And again, Curtis, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful program. We appreciate your taking the time to put it together for us. We congratulate you and your team on the great achievement, and we thank you for taking your time with us today. And thanks everyone for joining us.